can't dominate 13 opponents start to finish, but this was just about as close as it could be. And in some respects, Steve, I gained so much respect for this team and its resiliency, considering it was a third consecutive difficult opponent, down by double digits. And if you really look at the Wisconsin effort in the second half, usually when you come back and score 27 straight points against a good team, they gave it to you. They gave you opportunities. Wisconsin, yeah, they dropped a punt snap, and that only turned into a field goal. Basically, Wisconsin didn't blow coverages, didn't throw interceptions, didn't drop the ball. They were still playing sound fundamental football. This team just kicked it into gear with better speed, athleticism, and strength.
Yeah, you make a lot of good points there. It had the look and feel of Iowa and Purdue, those losses from the two previous seasons at halftime when it was 21-7. And the worst part about it, well, there were a lot of worst parts about it. I mean, they didn't match Wisconsin's intensity or physicality. I mean, Wisconsin came right out on the first play and threw a pass for 20 yards. And basically, they ran two plays the rest of the half, which was the slant to Quintez Cephas and running the ball with Jonathan Taylor, and that was it. They moved the ball up and down the field against Ohio State's great defense. But Ohio State scored in the final minute to cut the lead to 14-7, and you're thinking, this is great. They're getting the ball to start the third quarter. They could tie it right up. And I'm in the back in the photo room at that time because I figured, well, there's 40 seconds left. There's not much going to happen here. And they allowed Taylor to rip off a 45-yard run on the first play. And you've got the guys on Fox saying that even Paul Chryst had basically flown the white flag and had said, well, if Taylor gets stopped on this play, we'll just go into halftime. Well, he didn't get stopped. He bounced it outside. They broke tackles, 45 yards. A penalty on Ohio State, a pass play to Cephas, and then a touchdown. And now it's 21-7, and it's not looking or feeling real good for Ohio State at that point. But the Buckeyes win it at halftime. They regrouped, and as we said, they had the ball to start the second half. I wrote a story today on our site about what I feel may have been the most important play of the game. And it's 3rd and 7 on the 28-yard line on the first drive of the second half, and Fields just kind of drifts out to his left, and they put this old scramble rule in effect where you'd think everyone's going to run back to the quarterback to help him out. No, just go deep. Just go deep. And he threw it over everybody to Chris Olave for 50 yards, and that set up the touchdown to Ruckert, and there were two more to KJ Hill. And you made a very good point. The first touchdown to Ruckert, 5 plays, 75 yards. With that one big hitter, obviously, to Olave. The other two drives, 7 plays, 69 yards to Hill, the one down the middle, and then 9 plays, 65 yards, the one to Hill in the back of the end zone where he lost the defender and then very politely pointed at him after he caught the touchdown. I thought that was a nice, neat touch that could have, with another crew, elicited one of those, but everyone, they swallowed the flag, so to speak. But in a nutshell, that was it. Ohio State came back with great resolve in the second half. And defense, I don't think their defense gets enough credit for what they did in the second half. 27-0, they blanked them. And really until the last drive of the game when they took over after the field goal on their own 5-yard line or something like that, they moved it like 60 or 70 yards on that last drive all the way down to the 5-yard line. I guess that adds up to 90 yards or whatever it would be, but whatever it was, 80 yards, 90 yards, and they knocked the quarterback out of bounds on the last play. They only had 60 yards in the half up until that point. I mean, they had been dominated in terms of their offense versus Ohio State's defense. So command performance by the defense. They bottled up Taylor. It was weird. I had a friend tell me that Taylor only carried it 7 times in the second half after he had 120 yards in the first half or whatever his number was. He had like 7 for 20 in the second half. And isn't it curious that they ran the zone read and the quarterback kept it one time in the first half and nobody touched him and he ran for a touchdown and we never saw that play in the second half. So Paul Blart, this one's for you. And another command performance by Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game. Buckeyes on to victory and on to the playoff.
Tony, I was pretty impressed, but the College Football Playoff Selection Committee apparently wasn't. But your thoughts about whether it be the championship game or the selection on Sunday?
Well, I wonder if the committee maybe stopped watching at halftime and didn't. That 27-0 to me is more impressive than the 21-7 in that first half, going against an opponent who has seen you now twice and knows what they did wrong in that first game and worked to fix that. And they did, because Jonathan Taylor was hitting some big hits, and it's not like he was wide open in terms of having these gaping holes. He was getting hit and was breaking some tackles, and so made some headway there. Then that they get that, I don't want to call it a fluke touchdown, as Steve was talking about at the end of the first half, but Wisconsin came in knowing what to expect from Ohio State. They had just played them, 6 weeks ago or whatever, and they had fixed their problems. Ohio State had really only known success. Yeah, the first half was tough the first time around, but how much do you fix from a game that you won 38-7? What can you do other than you wait to see what Wisconsin is doing, and then you counter punch? And the Jeff Hafley says you can't wait until halftime to make halftime adjustments, because by then it's too late. But the adjustments they made at halftime this time around really stopped everything Wisconsin was doing, and maybe they made those adjustments before then. But I would argue that the long touchdown or the long run by Jonathan Taylor at the end of the second quarter would tell you that maybe those adjustments hadn't quite been made just yet. And so they were successful making some second half adjustments, some halftime adjustments. And really all year they've done that really, really well. Go back to the Nebraska game where Nebraska was rolling the I formation out at Ohio State, something we haven't seen in, 14 years or so, some long time at Nebraska. And it lasted for maybe 2 series before Ohio State, Jeff Hafley and Greg Madison shut it down. And they've done a really good job of that this year. Look at Michigan throwing for 250 yards in the first half and 55 in the second half. So I thought maybe they had done enough, but then also in the back of my mind all along, there was this thought that the Alabama win and the Georgia win would be too much for Ohio State to overcome in terms of LSU getting that number 1 seed. And it looks like that's what happened, especially when you keep Georgia at number 5 after getting destroyed by LSU, which was kind of a crock.
Can I throw my 2 cents in on that?
Yep.
I think it was razor thin between Ohio State and LSU, even the 2 weeks that we saw. In the final analysis, Ohio State beat 5 teams in the top 25. LSU beat 4 teams in the top 15, which is essentially a wash. And I just think they watched LSU go out on Saturday and eviscerate Georgia. People will say, ooh, Georgia was overrated. They were the number 4 team. Well, their resume wasn't all that much different or better than Wisconsin's, and Wisconsin was number 8. So both of them lost to an unranked team, and, is what it is. And Wisconsin's other loss was to Ohio State. So at any rate, I'd say they're about even, and LSU took care of business against Georgia. Ohio State did not take care of business against Wisconsin. And even at halftime, Urban Meyer, I believe on the broadcast, was quoted as saying this one is now tipping toward LSU as the number 1 seed. I think even he had to admit that. So obviously great comeback for Ohio State. And when it was over, the Fox guys were now back firmly behind Ohio State. But unfortunately, the damage had been done. And I think that they probably got this we could debate this till the cows come home. They're both 13-0, both clearly better than Clemson, or at least had better season than Clemson, or at least accomplished more than Clemson. Let's just say that. I don't know that one is a better team than the other. We just don't know how good Clemson is. But I think certainly tough call for the committee, but they probably got it right putting LSU number 1.
It's another example of the SEC doing right by their teams and the Big Ten doing wrong by theirs. You look at Ohio State finishing their 3 games with, Penn State and Michigan and Wisconsin, And then you've got the SEC trying to do what they can to set up their teams to finish with a softer schedule to look better down the stretch. And I think that had a lot to do with it. And just having Ohio State play Penn State, then Michigan, and then obviously the conference championship game, talking to the players afterwards, I mean, that's a lot. And they were tired and they were sore. And I think maybe that first half kind of, I don't know, maybe took a little bit out of them, or they weren't quite ready for the physicality of it. And Justin Fields was a little bit off early on. It took him a little while to come around. But, and then the SEC does what they can to make their teams' lives a little bit easier with their scheduling, even going with the 8 teams instead of 9 teams. Big Ten, will they ever go back to 8 teams? I don't know. I kind of doubt it at this point, unless everybody else does. But yeah, it's when you're questioning, when you don't know, like when you're like, well, it could go either way, then really, I guess it's hard to have an argument or a complaint when you say yourself, like, yeah, I could see either one, because LSU has this argument, beating Alabama and Georgia are 2 very good wins. But Ohio State has more good wins and a better defense. But then LSU's defense, like the last 3 weeks, looked really, really good because they weren't playing very good offenses. But they cleaned up what the committee wanted them to clean up.
I'll throw in, just in continuing that discussion, I understand fully where you're coming from regarding the conference setting up LSU to succeed, or Alabama, or whoever it may be, Georgia. Of course, Georgia plays a, quote, rivalry game with Georgia Tech, which some of them do. Florida plays Florida State. South Carolina plays Clemson, et cetera, that week before. And it varies from one year to the next how difficult that game is going to be. So some of them do have the week off with a Coppin State or whoever it may be, and some of them don't. What I would say is go back to 2015. Ohio State played Michigan State the week before they played Michigan, and they lost that game. That was the first of the series, what would have been the series in a row. So sometimes you just lose the game because you didn't play well. I think that what I understand was it was reported that from the Associated Press, it was the first time since 1983 with Georgia and Herschel Walker that a team defeated 3 top 10 teams on consecutive Saturdays. Perhaps it had happened in week 11, week 12 in a bowl game, but it had never happened on 3 consecutive Saturdays back to Herschel Walker and Georgia in 1983. One other thing that I hear all the time is everyone needs to be playing 9 conference games. Everybody needs to be playing 8 conference games and whatever. And you make a very good point about that. I just called up the Sagarin computer rankings. And you know what they tell me? Ohio State was number 1 in the computer ranking. Clemson was number 2. LSU was number 3. The schedule rankings were Ohio State 18, Clemson 60, and LSU with 10. Now, your comment was they play 8 conference games. They played 8 conference games, and their strength of schedule is better than Ohio State, who played 9 conference games. I think the number of conference games is immaterial. I think the Big Ten is scheduling 9 conference games, and the Big Ten, with its computer program, is spreading out the good matchups across the 10 weeks to maximize the bang of the buck for the Fox and the ESPN TV package. So you could say that things are done for strategic reasons, and you could say that things are done for television and monetary reasons. And I think Big Ten right now is skewing more toward, let's get Indiana, Purdue, Minnesota, Wisconsin, all these other also ran schools paid, as opposed to worrying about Ohio State trying to impress voters and win the college football playoff. I think there is a very valid discussion of that, but it is a misnomer, in my opinion, for anyone to say, they need to have 9 conference games, and they shouldn't play FCS schools the week before their rivalry games and all this other stuff. Notre Dame should join a conference. bull. This is what's made college football great. Big Ten does it one way, ACC does it one way, Pac-12 does it one way, and we just accept it's apples versus oranges every year. It is what it is. And what Sagarin is telling me here is if you took Ohio State's 13 opponents, 1 through 13, and matched them up 1 through 13 against LSU, there's not a whole heck of a lot of difference there. So LSU did play a good schedule. Clemson, on the other hand, the difference between 18 and 10 and 60 is pretty marginal in my opinion, or is a large margin in my opinion. So I'm off my soapbox on the structure of college football. And, I would agree with you if you want your team to get to 13-0, don't schedule it this way because it took a special once a generation Ohio State team to come through that.
Yeah, the 9 games is definitely about inventory, and that's you've got your own network, so you've got to fill out that.
Yeah, they'd rather have Rutgers playing Maryland or Maryland playing Minnesota than Maryland playing
Liberty,
Texas State, or just a complete non-entity. At least you could say it is a Big Ten conference game. That's why they're up to 20 games in basketball too, is because they want that inventory for Big Ten network of conference games.
Yeah, and I'm with you, Steve. I don't want everybody to be the same because that's why college football is great. All of the different styles of offenses and defenses. If I wanted the same, I would watch the NFL on Sunday, and I don't. So
yeah, it's almost unwatchable. What I found is it's great to turn it on while I'm laying in bed and thinking about going to sleep. And then the next thing I know, it's the third quarter and I haven't missed anything. So
exactly,
they're harsh on the NFL.
It's still 10-7.
It's still 10-7. Yeah,
harsh on the NFL. All right, I'm not going to take up that fight today.
We are shepherds and stewards of a better product. Let's just say that.
And we live in Columbus, so we're stuck with the Browns and the Bengals every week.
We are shepherds and stewards of a more exciting product. I don't know that it's a better product. It's the quality on the field. Obviously, they're professionals. It's more exciting. The fan bases are more rabid. There's more passion. There's more pageantry. There's more tradition. There's a whole lot better about college football.
It's better. You just said it. It's better.
Steve, not to correct you, but I will, as a senior Big Ten writer, you got your SEC legends mixed up, and I checked it because I thought I had heard this week. That was Bo Jackson's Auburn team in 1983 that beat 3 consecutive top 10 teams. Florida number 5, Maryland at number 7, and Georgia number 4.